Good evening, this is Brass Tacks. I'm Zaka Jacob. Billionaire investor George Soros, speaking at the Munich Security Conference, let out that Adani owes an explanation to his investors about the crash in his share prices. He also said that Modi cannot keep quiet either. He says that this will lead to a quote-unquote democratic revival in India. The BJP, of course, was quick to latch on to this, saying that Soros is the chief funder of all anti-India elements and that the cat is out of the bag now. This, according to the BJP, is proof that vested foreign interests are wanting to dislodge the Modi government. The opposition, though, has distanced itself from Soros. Before we get to our panelists, right up top here on Brass Tacks, first, the story of what this billionaire investor said and how the BJP is seeing red about it.
Modi and business tycoon Adani are close allies. Their fate is intertwined.
Amidst the storm over Adani, billionaire investor George Soros added fuel to fire. He talked about a democratic revival in India in the wake of the Hindenburg report and said Prime Minister Modi will have to answer questions from foreign investors.
Adani is accused of stock manipulation and his stock collapsed like a house of cards. Modi is silent on the subject, but he will have to answer questions from foreign investors and in Parliament.
The BJP called Soros' remark a declaration to destroy India's democratic processes.
Who brings an onslaught to the economy of India, all so that he can personally. Those who support Mr. Soros need to know that democracy has prevailed in India and will continue to do so.
Senior Congress leader Jairam Ramesh declared that the party has nothing to do with George Soros. But soon the BJP unearthed a Congress link, tweeting pictures of the global vice president of George Soros' Open Society Foundation, Salil Shetty, walking alongside Rahul Gandhi during his Bharat Jodo Yatra. And another party face and close aide of Rahul Gandhi, Praveen Chakravarti, appeared to endorse Soros' views.
Congress leadership like Praveen Chakravarti has come out openly and peddled the agenda and narrative of George Soros.
As the war of words escalates, is it about perspective or propaganda?
So who exactly is George Soros? He's a 92-year-old American investor and philanthropist. He founded what is a non-profit known as the Open Society Foundation, which financially supports civil society groups around the world. He has a net worth of $8.5 billion. He launched his first hedge fund back in 1969, and right the next year, he started a second one. In 1992, George Soros became one of the most famous currency traders in the world when he bet an enormous amount of money against the British pound, saying that the British pound will collapse. In the process, he pocketed over $1 billion and brought the Bank of England, the central bank, down to its knees. This, of course, was when a conservative, Tory majority was ruling Britain. Meanwhile, Soros has also vowed to fight nationalists across the world. George Soros has been accused in the past as well of interfering in the affairs of different countries. During the 2020 US elections, Donald Trump had accused Soros of providing financial support to various political organizations and candidates, particularly those who were aligned with his progressive values. However, it's worth noting that the campaign finance laws in the US allow individuals to donate money. Soros has also been accused of meddling in Ukrainian politics by supporting civil society groups and media outlets that were critical of pro-Russia former President Viktor Yanukovych. Some have alleged that Soros played a role in the 2014 Ukrainian revolution that led to Yanukovych's ouster. Soros has also been a frequent target of criticism from Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who has accused Soros of meddling in his country's politics through support for civil society groups and media outlets that are critical of Orban's government. And Soros has been accused of meddling in Russian politics by supporting opposition groups that are critical of President Vladimir Putin. The Russian government has passed laws that restrict the activities of these foreign-funded NGOs, many of whom have received funding from Soros. Now, Soros' defense has been that providing funds to civil society groups is not illegal. He also continues to have multiple links to such organizations here in India. One such link is with the Nobel Prize-winning economist Amartya Sen and Soros. Both of them are on the advisory council of an NGO called Namati. In January of this year, Amartya Sen had said that an atmosphere of intolerance that is prevailing in India will end soon. Another link happens to be Harsh Mandar, who served as an advisory board member of the Soros Open Society Foundation from 2020 to 2022. Harsh Mandar was also named in the charge sheet linked to the violence in the Delhi 2020 riots case. Basharat Peer served as a fellow at the Open Society Foundation from 2009 to 2010. That year, Basharat Peer had claimed that Indian troops are killing protesters in Kashmir. And another link happens to be the Lawyers Collective NGO, which is headed by advocates Indira Jaising and Anand Grover. Their FCRA license was cancelled over donations from Soros. So why exactly does the Modi government think that George Soros is anti-India? There are antecedents involved here. In 2020, George Soros pledged $1 billion to fund a new university network to tackle the spread of nationalism. He said this publicly in a speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos. At WEF itself, he criticized Prime Minister Modi and accused him of creating a Hindu nationalist state and threatening to strip Muslims of their citizenship. In 2016, the Indian government had placed the Open Society Foundation on a watch list of organizations that it said were working against the country's interests. The government also alleged that Soros and his organizations were funding groups that were critical of Modi's policies, whether it's on human rights, freedom of the press, or religious tolerance. Let me now open this up to our panelists who are joining us. Aparajita Sarangi is BJP Member of Parliament and National Spokesperson. Sanjay Jha, former leader of the Congress Party and political analyst. Dr. Nalin Mehta, author of The New BJP. And Ray Locker is a journalist and author who's joining us from Salt Lake City in Utah. Let me start with Sanjay Jha. You know, there are specific allegations that the BJP, through Smriti Irani, other spokespersons have alleged as far as Mr. George Soros' role is concerned. Look at the organizations that he's funding, including here in India. They all seem to be propagating a certain kind of ideology. Some of them have been named in charge sheets, one of them specifically in the 2020 Delhi riots that happened. How do you respond to this very simple charge that Mr. Soros is actively funding anti-India and anti-Modi elements? Sanjay Jha.
Zaka, good evening. Number one, I think it's important to understand the context. The context was in the light of the massive meltdown of the Adani group. And we all know about the very close proximity of India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, whom people have seen as a sugar daddy or a fairy godmother to Gautam Adani. I mean, that is the point that we need to really focus on. Now, let me try and expand this. You know, on Indian democracy, I mean, let's talk about what happened in the year when Mr. Soros was in Davos making that statement about Mr. Modi. This is what The Economist, which, by the way, is more free market friendly, exactly what Mr. Modi's government at least pretends to be. And this is what The Economist said on a cover story, Zaka, and I reproduced that for you. The cover story had Mr. Modi, and the headline was Intolerant India. And this was the subtext on the cover: how Modi is endangering the world's largest democracy. This is not a secret at all. I mean, we live here in our country, and I'll be very honest with you, Zaka. This government is trying very hard to throttle domestic media. Good luck to the way all of you do your own fight at different levels. But the foreign media, I think, is independent. I mean, the BBC takes on
Sanjay,
Johnson.
I'll come to the media part in just 1 second. I want you to respond specifically to when Mr. Soros says that Mr. Modi will have to will be forced to respond. Mr. Adani will have to respond to investors, and hopefully this will lead to a democratic revival. Now, please tell me, what is this question of a democratic revival? There were 2 elections, free and fair elections, that Mr. Modi won, fair and square. It was not a thin majority or a narrow majority. It was, a humongous majority on both occasions. Nobody questioned, the conduct of those elections or the free and fair nature of them. What does Mr. Soros mean by democratic revival? I mean, doesn't that go to show, as the BJP is alleging, that just because Mr. Modi is in power, democracy is dead? But you are not going into the merits of the elections. He won 2 big elections fair and square. You can't take that away from him, can you?
No, I don't think it's got anything to do with the past elections, Zaka. Let's make this point very clear. I have been a banker, so I'm pretty much aware of what Mr. Soros' influence is on stock markets. And I can tell you, he's been taking on dictatorships Russia, China, Turkey. And he probably sees India as another authoritarian juggernaut at the moment. And frankly, I'll be very blunt with you. Who disagrees with him? Many people in India don't. The second point, end of day, what is this government trying to tell us? That the Morgan Stanley Capital International Index is anti-India. Moody's is anti-India. Are the markets anti-India because they're bleeding the Adani stocks? Is Citibank, Standard Chartered and Credit Suisse anti-India? Is Total Energy anti-India? Is the Norwegian fund anti-India?
So let me ask that to Aparajita Sarangi of the BJP. I mean, it's not just one Soros, but multiple institutional investors, foreign investors have sort of backed away from this particular stock or this group of companies, whereby it's lost over $100 billion worth of its valuation. Aren't you running the risk, Aparajita Sarangi, of by defending a private company and a set of private companies, you are going out there on a limb to take on foreign institutional investors at a time when you're saying India is the fastest growing economy, the maximum returns in the stock markets are coming from emerging markets like India? Why is the government and why is every BJP spokesperson going out on a limb defending a private company?
At the outset, let me tell you that those who love India and the democratic processes for which we are known in this world would hate the nefarious designs of George Soros. This is the first statement that I wanted to make. And here, Prime Minister Modi, with all emphasis, most emphatically I would like to say, is here with a huge people's mandate. He's here in the Lok Sabha with 303 members of parliament. Let's not forget that. And here is a person who's trying to uphold the democratic values in the country. Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas has been the clarion call given by him. It is the backbone of all we do. And here is a person, George Soros. Let's not forget that he has been critical of the way Prime Minister Modi's government has been functioning since 26th May 2014, the day he took over the reins of the country. He was critical of the abrogation of Article 370 by the Parliament, right? And he was also critical of the passage of the Citizenship Amendment Act by the Parliament. Now, I can tell you across party lines, I think all of us should gather together and in one voice condemn the attitude, the designs of this person, George Soros. He may be a big entrepreneur, but we know that he is an economic war criminal. That is what he has been dubbed as, number one. And number two, he once upon a time broke the Bank of England. Now he is all out to break the democracy in India. I think we are all very much aware of the fact
But Aparajita
that
Sarangi,
India
can I intervene
fast?
for 10 seconds? I mean, it is not up to George Soros or any multi-billionaire out there to decide, who is going to rule India or who is going to become Prime Minister of India. That's up to the people of India. The people of India like Mr. Modi, they will vote for him. If they don't like Mr. Modi, they will vote him out of office. Why are you giving this lone individual, who's not even an Indian citizen, so much bhav, as they say?
See, we are extremely conscious of the fact that there are elements within India and outside India who are trying to create disorder within the country. In fact, it is the responsibility of Prime Minister Modi and his entire team, the Ministry of Home Affairs and of course the Ministry of Defence to ensure that there is security within the country and we all live at peace. So I think when there is a person who is sitting outside and commenting on the internal matters of India, I think it's a cause of concern.
Okay.
And those who are in the opposition camp, if they say that it's not a cause of concern, that there is something really wrong, that means they have joined hands with these forces who are outside and trying to destabilize
let me
the
ask
country's issues.
Dr. Nalan Mehta, what the BJP is saying is, look at all of these incidents that have happened over the last 3, 4, 5 years. These are sort of non-democratic attempts at, pulling down the government of India. They can't defeat Mr. Modi electorally. Therefore, they are trying these non-democratic means, whether it is the Shaheen Bagh protest, the farmers' protest, and now, of course, what you're seeing with Hindenburg and Adani. Is there merit to that argument? Because I keep going back to this. Ultimately, 2024 is not going to be decided by a bunch of billionaire investors. it's going to be decided by the 70 crore or 75 crore eligible voters of India.
So, Zaka, you're absolutely right. I don't think somebody sitting somewhere in the West can decide what's happening in India. However, see, George Soros has been the bogeyman in Central and Western Europe and Eastern Europe for a very long time. In the US, several Republicans have written letters to the Secretary of State at multiple points in time, and conservative housemakers in particular. In the current debate, I think what's interesting is, and let me respond to what Sanjay was saying earlier in the program. See, people can have any opinion on the current political economy and so on, and on the Adani question. Everybody's free to make their own judgment. The difference between a foreign journalist saying the same thing and a George Soros saying the same thing is that George Soros funds organizations which are accused of dabbling in areas of regime change. This is what happened in multiple countries across Central and Eastern Europe. So he becomes a very convenient bogeyman. Now, the fact of the matter is the political optics of this. Now, whatever his impact or lack thereof, the fact of the matter is it gives a very convenient handle to the BJP and to everybody who's pro-Modi to say, look, everybody who's opposing us is part of this kind of a foreign hand. The foreign hand is a very long legacy in Indian politics going back 30, 40 years. And Soros is a very convenient thing to hang that on because he does fund organizations that are in the business of liberal democracy. So the optics of this is what is important, not necessarily the impact of what he's saying. And by the way, if today a Ratan Tata or another big Indian industrialist was to say that, look, I'm going to fund organizations in the US or in the UK which are against conservative governments, think of it the reverse way as well. So I think the importance here is not so much of what George Soros can and cannot do, but the optics of it.
So let me ask Ray Locker, who's joining us from Utah. We have seen Soros's influence in other governments and meddling in elections in other countries. There have been allegations of him doing so for a number of years against Viktor Orban's government in Hungary. We've seen that supporting anti-Putin functionaries and anti-Putin parties and journalists and so on in Russia. Even in the 2020 election aftermath, many Republicans came out and said that a lot of their candidates lost because George Soros was putting money behind Democratic candidates. Now, the question that's being asked is, all right, you're a businessman, but you are not in the business of changing or deciding who should be heading a government in a foreign country like India or Russia or Hungary or any other country for that matter. Why should this gentleman have this kind of, almost what he said was democratic revival? I fail to understand. I mean, what sort of democratic revival is he talking about? Because we've just had two absolutely free and fair elections. Just because you don't like the result of that election does not make those elections undemocratic.
Well, that's exactly right. I don't think it made those elections non-democratic. It's no secret that many people around the world think that Narendra Modi is an autocrat. Soros is one of them. And you look at the people that he's funded organizations that challenge Viktor Orban, Vladimir Putin, Yanukovych. I mean, none of those are really good guys. That's what Soros does. People find him a convenient bogeyman because he does things they don't like. What the Republicans said about him in 2020 and in years before that was never true. He was never out to get them, or he didn't make them lose. And what he said about Adani makes total sense. Adani and Modi have been joined at the hip for years. And now it looks like, because of the Hindenburg report, that Adani's fortune is built on a house of cards. And so it'll be up to the markets to decide whether that's true or not. And that's no mystery to somebody like Soros.
So can I just ask you, all right,
revival, well, that's his opinion.
I don't hold the brief for this private company that you refer to, but whatever's happened over the last month is between the investors of that company and the management of that company. What has that got to do with democracy? What has that got to do with free and fair elections in this country? And frankly,
I think that was a stretch.
I don't think, for the average man on the street, honestly, here in India, I don't think the Adani story is a material story, a bread and butter story that affects a large majority of the population here. It affects, of course, investors who've invested in his company, but not the average voter.
Oh, exactly right. And I think, what Soros said about a democratic revival is a stretch. Again, that's his opinion. I mean, he extrapolated from the relationship between Adani and Modi to reach that conclusion, and he's entitled to do that. It's up to people whether they want to agree with him or not. And I can tell that many people don't. But to use Soros as a foil for other things, I mean, it's very convenient for the ruling party. They make it an attack on India. What's nothing but that? Nothing like that at all. It's just his opinion and a logical conclusion made about the closeness between Modi and Adani.
Okay, so Sanjay Jha, one of the other sort of fallouts of this Soros statement and then the BJP going after him has been that now there are pictures that BJP leaders have tweeted of a gentleman named Salil Shetty. He's the vice president, I believe, of Open Society Foundation. He is seen walking with Rahul Gandhi in the Bharat Jodo Yatra. And when the story initially broke, Jairam Ramesh, the lead media head of the Congress party, said that, look, any change that's going to happen in India is not going to happen because of Soros. It's going to happen because of the opposition parties, because of India's democratic tradition, so on and so forth, seemingly distancing himself from what Soros said. But now you have this picture, which BJP leaders are tweeting about Salil Shetty joining Bharat Jodo. So the BJP is basically saying the link is out there for everyone to see between Soros and the Congress party.
Well,
it's not surprising.
So what? My question is, so what? I mean, the bigger answer that the BJP needs to give today, because they are acting as if they are the legal counsel for Mr. Adani. Mr. Modi and everyone has become like the lawyers for Mr. Adani. They need to explain to the people that why are the markets believing the Hindenburg research and not Gautam Adani, who wore this cloak of nationalism. And today I find every BJP spokesperson or leader literally passionately defends Mr. Adani as if he's a Savarkar for them. I mean, this is something that the BJP needs to explain to the people of India. Point number two.
But Sanjay, once again, again, I keep going back to this. The opposition is hoping that in this Adani saga, you are seeing a Bofors repeat, or at least you're hoping that this will be Mr. Modi's Achilles heel, as it was for Rajiv Gandhi. I'm asking a very simple question. I asked this to Ray Locker as well. I'm yet to come across an average Joe on the street who's not invested in an Adani stock be concerned about this story.
Let me tell you, Zaka, I live in Mumbai. And trust me, this is not about crony capitalism anymore. This is about corruption. This is about corruption, which is why the BJP is worried. And Mr. Modi has to explain this. I'm not even worried about what Mrs. Sarangi says. It's Mr. Modi who has to explain. I think the BJP also perhaps is not aware of what really are the circumstances that have resulted in these sweetheart deals that has compromised India's standing in the rest of the world. I'm going to accuse the BJP through your platform, Zaka, of destroying India's brand reputation. And the point that Nalin Mehta made, I'll tell you where he's wrong. Nalin says, George Soros says, that basically amplifies into a political story. Okay. But Nalin, you are a very seasoned guy. But when the BBC questioned, the BBC was talked about as a Congress conspiracy. If today, for example, the Economist criticizes Mr. Modi's government, it's a Congress conspiracy. So what are you talking about?
I'll ask Nalin that, but first let Aparajita Sarangi respond to you. Aparajita Sarangi, Sanjay Jha saying the government owes an explanation to the country, not just to investors of Adani, as to why the markets seem to be believing the Hindenburg report more than they are believing what every spokesperson of your party is coming out there and doing in terms of defending this company.
PM Modi bashing has become the favorite sport of the people belonging to the opposition camp. So they would be doing this, whatever we may say. But I would definitely like to mention that it is not a coincidence that Pegasus comes before the parliament starts. And Hindenburg report is not tabled just before the parliament. These are not coincidences. So I think we are all intelligent enough to understand the reason. Now, as far as Hindenburg report is concerned and that particular industrialist and his organization is concerned, there are 3 petitions in the Supreme Court right now, and we have agreed to the Supreme Court's suggestion that there would be an expert committee, and we are open to all scrutiny by this expert committee. Okay. This is one. And number 2, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has come out into the open and very clearly, assertively, she has said that a SEBI, the regulator, is looking into the matter. It would come out with a comprehensive report and it would be for the world to see. Okay. So I think we are open to all kinds of scrutiny, and anybody bringing out a report, say Hindenburg, and we are all, we should not be actually getting jittery and trying to kind of start a JPC on that. So I think there has to be substantial issue for JPC. So let things come out. Let the Supreme Court give its judgment. Let the expert committee look into it, and then I think we can take a decision. Madam.
All right, let Nalin now respond. Sanjay, one second. Let Nalin respond to the question that you asked him. Let Nalin respond, yeah. Nalin.
And let's not jump the bandwagon like this.
All right, yeah. Nalin Mehta, please. Thank you, Nalin Mehta.
Thanks, Zaka. I was just making the very simple point to Sanjay that there is a distinction between journalists criticizing a particular issue, rightly or wrongly, and a financier who is in the business of funding various causes, and his criticism. I was only making that point, and when that happens, it allows the BJP to paint a narrative on the ground, saying that look, this is a diabolical Western conspiracy that all these guys don't understand it, and that plays very well into the Modi template of us versus them, which has worked for him all of these years, right from his years as Gujarat Chief Minister.
But
that's what I'm saying.
It can't be that suddenly, every foreign agency, foreign investor, foreign media publication out there is stacked up against Mr. Modi and his government. From BBC to New York Times to George Soros to Hindenburg, everybody is out to get them, quote unquote. I mean, that can't be
I think
true.
There are no. Zaka, I am not making the argument that there is a grand narrative where everybody has gone out and what I'm trying to say is that there are 2 different narratives here. One is what is the fact of the matter of in the Adani case. Regulators are looking at it. There's a whole bunch of things happening around that. Aside from that is the political narrative around it. Now there is a global narrative symbolized by The Economist and so on in their story, symbolized by many publications, symbolized by what the BBC documentary was about. What I'm saying is there is also many people in India, like Sanjay rightly said, who believe in that, and there are many opponents of the BJP who say that, including the Congress. What I'm saying is that when the BJP's political narrative on the ground is that this is us versus them, what is happening on the ground does not square with what's happening outside. Everybody wants to dismiss Modi as an autocrat. This is an attack on Indian democracy. Now, there's a reason why the Congress party also has distanced itself from what Soros said, because they're very aware of how this will play out on the ground at the lowest level of grassroots politics. That's the point I'm trying to make. And the Congress also is making the same point.
I'll give Ray Locker the final word. The issue with Soros is he has sold, and that's how he sort of shot to fame, as it were. Whether it was crashing the pound in the 1990s, many believe he had a role to play in the East Asian financial crisis that happened in 1997. And who knows, what his connections were with Hindenburg, which led to the crash of the Adani stock. I'm not saying that is illegitimate or that is illegal. Short selling, and Sanjay would vouch as a former banker, short selling is a legitimate trading tactic. But it is also a legitimate political tactic for a state or a company to turn around and say that there are a bunch of people who are deliberately targeting us, who are bent on crashing our value because they're trying to make money out of that crash. And that's exactly what's happened in the case of Adani. And that's what the government of India is now saying, that here are a bunch of people led by Mr. Soros who are wanting the India story to fail, who are wanting Indian companies to fail because they are profiting from it?
Some people are profiting from it, obviously. I mean, that's what short sellers do. I don't think Soros is behind them. I mean, it's a convenient conspiracy to lay out, particularly during an election season. And if you want to do that, and Soros has a track record. You look at what happened with the pound in 1992. I don't know about the East Asia financial crisis in 97 and his role in that. I think the Hindenburg report stands on its own. They did their research. There's obviously issues with Adani. And that'll play out on its own. I don't think really it has much to do with Modi unless somebody can prove it. And let me go back to your earlier point, Zaka, that, you know, this is a story that people don't really care about. A lot of stories start that way. And then all of a sudden they reach critical mass and everybody cares about them. We saw that with the Watergate scandal in the United States in 1972 to 1974. We've seen it in other places. So these things build, they take time. Whether Soros is behind him, I don't know.
Okay.
But there's some substance there, or the Adani Group's stock wouldn't have crashed.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. We'll see how the story plays out. But I think I tend to agree with what Nalin was saying, that as far as the BJP is concerned, without going into the merits or the demerits of the political arguments that are being placed, one thing is clear, that this plays straight into the narrative that the BJP is trying to build, that there are a whole host of actors out there, foreign actors, who are trying to destabilize the Modi government, trying to destabilize Indian companies, trying to destabilize the India story, as it were, because they don't like Mr. Modi having won these two big mandates. This, of course, for the BJP supporter, the average BJP voter, as it were, plays right into the suspicions that they have. All right, let me now move on to the other big story, and this is a huge political fillip to Eknath Shinde, the Maharashtra Chief Minister, and his faction of the Shiv Sena. The Election Commission today handed the bow and arrow symbol to the Shinde faction. The Uddhav faction, shell-shocked as it has now decided to challenge this decision before the Supreme Court. The Election Commission has gone by the precedent of the Janata Dal case and said that whichever faction has legislative majority will get the symbol.
हिंदुहृदय सम्राट बाळासाहेब ठाकरे जी, धर्मवीर आनंद दिघे जी, इनके विचारों का विजय है।
चुनाव आयोग ने दर्शा दिया है कि चुनाव आयोग भाजपा का एजेंट के रूप में काम करती है।
These are live pictures of Eknath Shinde, the Maharashtra Chief Minister, outside his official residence, speaking to the press after this momentous decision by the Election Commission to award the bow and arrow symbol to the Shinde faction of the Shiv Sena. He now becomes the official and the real Shiv Sena.
दिलेल्या निर्णयाचं मी स्वागत करतो। सत्याचा विजय झालाय। बाळासाहेबांच्या विचारांचा विजय झालाय। धर्मवीर आनंद दिघे साहेबांच्या विचारांचा विजय आहे आणि लोकशाहीचा विजय आहे। खरं म्हणजे या देशात डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकरांनी लिहिलेली घटना आहे, त्याच्यावर आपला कारभार चालतो आणि आजचा विजय जो आहे हा विजय बहुमताचा विजय आहे। पुन्हा एकदा मी सांगतो, हा लोकशाहीचा विजय आहे आणि ज्यांनी ज्या 50 आमदार, 13 खासदार, अनेक नगरसेवक, जिल्हा परिषद अध्यक्ष, सभापती, सदस्य, लाखो कार्यकर्ते आणि शिवसैनिक
party workers have worked very hard for this.
आपको चोर कहा जा रहा है। उद्धव ठाकरे आपको चोर कह रहे हैं। उद्धव ठाकरे उद्धव ठाकरे आपको चोर कह रहे, उद्धव ठाकरे यांनी बाहेर काढलेले, उद्धव ठाकरे आपको धनुष्यबाण बाहेर काढलेले.
किती काही कोणी
Let everybody say anything. Nobody
कुणालाही
can hide
लपवता
this.
येणार नाही, कुणालाही टाळता येणार नाही. खऱ्या अर्थाने आम्ही बाळासाहेबांचे विचार पुढे घेऊन जाण्याचा निर्णय घेतला आणि त्यांच्या विचारांचा हा विजय आहे. खऱ्या अर्थाने जे कोणी आज बोलताय की त्यांना खऱ्या अर्थाने त्यांनी 2019ला बाळासाहेबांचे विचार कुणाच्या तरी दावणीला बांधले, त्यांचे विचार विकण्याचं मोठं पाप केलं. त्यांना ही मोठी चपराक आहे. आणि जेव्हा जेव्हा त्यांच्या बाजूने निकाल लागतात तेव्हा ती न्यायव्यवस्था बरोबर असते. त्यांच्या जेव्हा विरोधात निकाल लागतो तेव्हा दबावाखाली निर्णय घेतला, ती न्यायव्यवस्था विकली गेली, ती स्वायत्त संस्था विकली गेली. अशा प्रकारचा जो आरोप आहे म्हणजे तेव्हा तेव्हा लोकशाही खतरे में, लोकशाही धोक्यामध्ये, लोकशाहीचा खून म्हणजे तुमच्या बाजूनी निकाल दिला की लोकशाही बरोबर, हे असं जे काय दुटप्पी भूमिका.
All right, that was Eknath Shinde, the Maharashtra Chief Minister, elated that the Election Commission has awarded the bow and arrow symbol and the title of the party Shiv Sena to his faction. Let me also play out what Uddhav Thackeray, the former Chief Minister and the head of the Thackeray faction of the Shiv Sena, said after this decision today by the Election Commission.
मागे एकदा असं म्हटलं होतं की हा छत्रपतींचा महाराष्ट्र आहे, अंध धृतराष्ट्र नाहीये. या निर्णयाच्या विरुद्ध आम्ही सर्वोच्च न्यायालयात तर जाणारच आहोत. आम्हाला खात्री आहे की सर्वोच्च न्यायालयामध्ये ह्याचा निकाल लागेलच. धनुष्यबाण त्यांनी चोरल्याचा आनंद त्यांना मिळू द्या की ही लढाई आता शेवटपर्यंत आपल्याला लढावीच लागेल आणि विजय आपलाच होणार.
All right, let me go across to two guests who are joining us. Rahul Londhe is from the Shiv Sena, the Shinde faction, and Kishore Tiwari is a Shiv Sena leader from the Uddhav faction. I guess now today officially the Shinde faction becomes the official Shiv Sena with the bow and arrow symbol and the name Shiv Sena. So let me ask Kishore Tiwari ji, जो चुनाव आयोग ने उसके निर्णय में ये कहा है कि जो प्रेसिडेंट है जनता दल केस में, जो प्रेसिडेंट है कि लेजिस्लेचर की असेंबली जो है वहां पे जिसको मेजॉरिटी है उसी को देंगे सिंबल और पार्टी का नाम. यही प्रेसिडेंट हुआ था जनता दल के केस में और अब शिवसेना के केस में भी यही प्रेसिडेंट वो फॉलो कर रहे हैं.
नहीं, एक बात मैं बताऊं, यह निवडणूक जो चुनाव आयोग है, चुनाव आयोग ने जो तरीका अपनाया था तो हम पहले ही चले गए. इनका निर्णय इसी प्रकार का आने वाला था, मुझे लग रहा था. तो हमने रमना साहब रहते हुए ही सुप्रीम कोर्ट में यह बात बताई थी कि ये लोग पक्षपाती भूमिका लेके बैठे हैं और यह शायद जो बीजेपी का प्लान है कि महाराष्ट्र में बाला साहब के चेहरे के बिगर चुनाव नहीं लड़ सकते, शिवसेना के साथ रहे बिगर वो नहीं लड़ सकते, तो उनका प्लान है. हमारा एकनाथ शिंदे जी से कोई झगड़ा वगड़ा नहीं है. एकनाथ शिंदे तो एक मुखौटा है. हमारी लड़ाई यह बीजेपी से है और बीजेपी से ज्यादा देश में
किशोर तिवारी जी, बीजेपी
तो
का कहना ये है कि जो मैंडेट जो था 2019 में वो तो हिंदुत्व के लिए था, तो इसको पहले किसने तोड़ा? पहले तो उद्धव ठाकरे ने तोड़ा, तो अभी उसका जो परिणाम है वो झेल रहे हैं उसको.
नहीं, देखो यार जाकब, तुम तो मालूम है अब महाराष्ट्र में जो कुछ लोगों का रिएक्शन है, हमने जो किया वो किया. लेकिन हमने जब हमने मैंडेट बीजेपी के साथ लिया था और हमने जो सरकार कांग्रेस एनसीपी के साथ बनाई थी, तो हमने हमारी सरकार में जाने के पहले अपने पद का त्याग कर देना था. ये बात ठीक है, लेकिन आज वो लोग वापस चले गए. हमारे को उन्होंने सत्ता से दूर किया. पार्टी तो टूटी थी, पार्टी तोड़ी गई थी, पार्टी सूरत में गई, फिर पार्टी त्रिपुरा में गई, गोवा में गई और पार्टी के लिए लागत लगाने वालों का भी नाम बाहर आ गया.
तो राहुल लोंधे, अभी आपने उद्धव ठाकरे का भी सुना. उनका मानना यह है कि आप लोग चोर हैं, आप चुरा सकते हैं सिंबल को, बो एंड एरो को. और नाम को, शिवसेना नाम को आप चुरा सकते हैं, लेकिन जो लेगेसी है राहुल लोंधे, उद्धव ठाकरे का मानना यह है कि उन्हीं का है, ठाकरे नाम उनका है। हर पन्ना प्रमुख से लेकर, शाखा प्रमुख से लेकर, काउंसलर तक, एमएलए तक उन्हीं के पास है और जनता उनके पास है। आप इसको क्या कहेंगे?
मैं एक बात बताना चाहता हूँ कि आज तिवारी साहब भी महाराष्ट्र में और आपके सब रिपोर्टर महाराष्ट्र में ये 36 जिले हैं, जितने तालुका, जितने शहर है, हर शहर के हर चौक में, हर तालुका के हर चौक में आज जश्न मनाया जा रहा है। माहौल एकदम उत्साह का माहौल है, पटाखे फोड़े जा रहे हैं। मतलब ये क्या है? ये तो विजय हुआ है। अगर एकनाथ शिंदे साहब की भूमिका महाराष्ट्र की जनता स्वीकृत नहीं करती, एक्सेप्ट नहीं करती, तो आज धनुष्यबाण मिलने के बाद, पार्टी के नाम मिलने के बाद पूरे महाराष्ट्र में तो मातम होना चाहिए था। लेकिन महाराष्ट्र में आज माहौल का जश्न है। ये क्यों है? क्योंकि लोगों को पता है कि बाला साहब ठाकरे की विचार एकनाथ शिंदे साहब आगे लेके जा रहे हैं। बाला साहब ठाकरे के हिंदुत्ववादी विचार एकनाथ साहब जिंदा रख रहे हैं और आगे लेके जा रहे हैं। इसलिए तो महाराष्ट्र में जश्न का माहौल है।
नहीं, राहुल जी, लेकिन ये बात भी तो है ना, ठाकरे नाम तो उन्हीं के पास है, आपके पास ठाकरे नाम तो नहीं है।
ये देखिए, ठाकरे उनका नाम है, लेकिन बाला साहब नाम हम बार बार यही कहते हैं। एकनाथ शिंदे साहब ने भी यही कहा कि बाला साहब जो वारिसदार है, मातोश्री 1, मातोश्री 2 प्रॉपर्टी के वारिसदार उद्धव ठाकरे, आदित्य ठाकरे।
नहीं, किशोर तिवारी जी जो ये कह रहे हैं कि जो असली वारिस जो है बाला साहब ठाकरे का जो फिलॉसफी है, चाहे जो भी मातोश्री में बैठे ना बैठे, लेकिन उनका मानना ये है किशोर तिवारी कि जो असली वारिस है वो आइडियोलॉजी जो है वो फॉलो करता है, और आइडियोलॉजी तो हिंदुत्व का है, और वो सिर्फ एकनाथ शिंदे ही फॉलो कर रहा है आइडियोलॉजी।
देखिए वर्तमान है, वर्तमान में उद्धव जी ने जो भी परिस्थिति आई उसका सामना किया, कोरोना का भी बहुत अच्छे से सामना किया। दूसरा ये जो पार्टी टूटी, आज इलेक्शन कमीशन का रिजल्ट आया। मैं पहला प्रवक्ता हूं जो कह रहा हूं कि इस चैलेंज को हमने ले लिया है। अब हमारा एक सुप्रीम कोर्ट में सुनवाई होगी। सुप्रीम कोर्ट में प्रजातंत्र जिंदा है, चंद्रचूड़ सरी के आदमी बैठे हैं, तो उसकी राह देखेंगे। नहीं तो जनता में तो जानता है। अब ये जो मुद्दे हैं राहुल के कि बाला साहेब की लीगेसी ये इन लोगों के पास है, इन लोगों का ये भी मुद्दा है कि जनता का क्या बोलते जनमत इनके पास है। तो चलो मैं सब मान लेता हूं, हमने तो मशाल हाथ में ले ली है। ये अब है ना, हम मशाल बोलते तो राहुल तुम मशाल भी तो हमारे हाथ से छीन नहीं लेंगे। अभी कैसा है,
क्या करेंगे आप? तो कभी नहीं बोला जो नहीं हर वोटर जानता है, हर शिव सैनिक जानता है किशोर तिवारी जी कि आपका सिंबल तो मशाल नहीं है, आपका सिंबल तो बो एंड एरो है, और वो सिंबल जो है आज शिंदे साहब के पास है, आपके पास नहीं है।
अरे क्या,
तो आपके पास क्या बचा है?
अरे भाई क्या बचा है ये देखना है तो मुंबई का चुनाव ले लो, पुणे का चुनाव ले लो, नागपुर का चुनाव ले लो, जनता ही बची है हमारे साथ।
तो
ऐसा थोड़ी
तो
होता।
क्या राहुल जी हम ये तय कर सकते हैं, आज ये तय करके बोल सकते हैं कि बीएमसी का जो चुनाव है, जो पिछले 3, 4, 5, 6 महीने से हम सुन रहे हैं कि बीएमसी का चुनाव होने वाला है, आज के निर्णय के बाद तो अभी तो रास्ता तो साफ हो गया ना कि बीएमसी के चुनाव लड़ा जाए। और क्या ये माना जाए कि बीएमसी के चुनाव में अगर उद्धव ठाकरे फैक्शन मशाल सिंबल के साथ आपसे ज्यादा सीट लेकर आए तो फिर लेगेसी उनकी होनी चाहिए, या आप अगर लेके आए तो वंस एंड फॉर ऑल ये सेटल हो जाएगा कि आप ही असली शिवसेना है?
नहीं, मैं यही बता रहा हूँ।
नहीं, राहुल लोंधे प्लीज, राहुल जी। या
बाला साहब असली शिवसेना बाला साहब की थी, बाला साहब की है और बाला साहब की रहने वाली है। अभी जो तिवारी साहब चुनाव की बात करें, चुनाव तो होने वाले हैं, तो दूध और दूध पानी का पानी होने वाला है। पिछले 6 महीने में जो महाराष्ट्र में मुख्यमंत्री एकनाथ शिंदे साहब को भारी और समर्थन मिल रहा है, वो समर्थन मिलने के बाद लोग किसके साथ जीतने वाले हैं। और जो उद्धव ठाकरे साहब ने बयान किया पत्रकार परिषद में, जिन्होंने वो धनुष्यबाण दिखाया कि जो बाला साहब ठाकरे उनकी पूजा करते थे धनुष्यबाण की, वो धनुष्यबाण हमारे लिए प्राण प्रिय है। इसलिए तो हमने ये हिंदुत्व का मुद्दा और धनुष्यबाण का मुद्दा उठाया था ना। और जो
मैंने सीधा सा सवाल पूछा राहुल जी, मैंने सीधा सा सवाल पूछा, मुंबई में जब चुनाव होगा बीएमसी का, क्या आप कॉन्फिडेंट है कि आप ठाकरे फैक्शन से ज्यादा सीट लेकर आ पाएंगे? बिकॉज शिवसेना का गढ़ है मुंबई।
डेफिनेटली मैं यहाँ पे ओवर कॉन्फिडेंस नहीं, लेकिन मैं आत्मविश्वास के साथ कहता हूँ, जहाँ बाला साहब ठाकरे जी के विचार, वही पार्टी इस मुंबई में, महाराष्ट्र में राज करने वाली है.
Okay, all right, we'll leave it at that. I want to thank both Rahul Londhe as well as Kishore Tiwari for joining us on this debate. Let's try and see whichever of the two parties, whichever of these two factions, as it were. Of course, symbols are hugely important in politics, and today that symbol, the symbol associated with the Shiv Sena, a bow and arrow, has gone to the Shinde faction. Now, let's move on to the other big story, a rare bipartisan signal of unequivocal support to India. 3 US senators introduced a resolution in the Senate stating that Arunachal Pradesh was an integral part of India. First, let's break down what this resolution says. It begins by saying that since the Sino-India War of 1962, the United States has recognized the McMahon Line as the international border between China and the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh, and that the US recognizes Arunachal Pradesh not as a disputed territory, but as an integral part of the Republic of India, and this recognition is not qualified in any way. The resolution also says that China claiming Arunachal as its territory is part of an increasingly aggressive and expansionist policy. It lists instances of the PLA's provocative moves at the line of actual control and alleges that this is upending the India-China relationship, and it has led to the Galwan Valley clash that we saw in 2020, resulting in the death of 20 Indian soldiers and many more Chinese soldiers as well. The resolution also states that China's provocations impede poverty alleviation and economic development in Arunachal Pradesh. So why is this resolution then such a big deal? This is the first time that there is a detailed resolution echoing India's position on Arunachal Pradesh and wider Chinese aggression at the line of actual control. This is the first time such a resolution has been moved in the Senate. It goes beyond just condemning China's actions to explicitly supporting India for the position it has taken vis-a-vis Chinese actions. And it is bipartisan in nature. This particular resolution has the support of both the progressive wing of the Democratic Party as well as the conservative end of the Republican Party. So what exactly is the line of actual control? How did it come into existence, and why is it such a thorn between India and China? Now, the LAC separates Indian-controlled territory from Chinese-controlled territory. In fact, India and China do not agree at large points of the line of actual control, in fact more than 60 such points. India considers the LAC to be a little under 3,500 kilometers long. China, on the other hand, recognizes only 2,000 kilometers of the line of actual control. The remaining almost 1,500 kilometers is disputed between both countries. It is divided into 3 sectors. You have the eastern sector, which accounts for Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim. You have the middle sector, which is Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh. And then, of course, you have the western sector, which is Ladakh, where we saw these clashes between 2020 and 2021. So this is a historic baggage, as it were, between India and China, which still has not been resolved after multiple rounds of boundary talks. So how did this turn into a dispute in the first place, this line of actual control, and the fact that it's not been demarcated between both sides? Like I said, the LAC between India and China has never really been either delimited or not entirely demarcated either. In the eastern sector, for example, the alignment right now is on the 1914 McMahon line. This line, which was drawn primarily on the highest watershed principle, simply marked out unclaimed or undefined borders between Britain and Tibet and included Tawang in the British Empire. China disputes this high watershed principle. It says Tibet should not have been the one that was negotiating this boundary. In 1959, then Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai wrote to Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru saying that the LAC was the so-called McMahon line in the east. After the 1962 war, the Chinese claimed that they had withdrawn to 20 kilometers behind the LAC of November 1959. India's stand has been that the Chinese should omit the gains from the 1962 war, and their line should be based on the position before the war happened. So what exactly is China's so-called claim on Arunachal Pradesh, and on what basis? What are the grounds for it? China claims about 90,000 square kilometers of Arunachal Pradesh as its territory. It calls the area Zhangnan in the Chinese language, which makes repeated reference to South Tibet In fact, one of the holiest shrines in Tibetan Buddhism happens to be in Arunachal Pradesh. Chinese maps show Arunachal Pradesh as part of China, and to underline this point, this unilateral claim as it were, it is given Chinese names to places in Arunachal Pradesh. Also, there was a controversy some time back of China granting stapled visas to residents of Arunachal Pradesh, not stamping the visa on their passport, thereby saying that they do not recognize the passport of India. In the last few years, Chinese troops have been increasingly aggressive in and around Arunachal Pradesh. In 2016, around 250 PLA troops showed up in the East Kameng district of Arunachal Pradesh, crossing a point which India says marks the line of actual control. In October of 2021, nearly 100 Chinese troops came to the Yangtze in the Tawang sector, and they were confronted by an Indian patrolling unit. There were also reportedly some pushing around, but local commanders stepped in to bring the situation under control. And then, of course, in December of last year, Indian and Chinese troops clashed in the Tawang sector. Both sides suffered minor injuries because of the face-off, according to the statement by the Indian Army. China has also been raising an alarm every time a world leader or an Indian politician goes to Arunachal Pradesh. Back in 2009, they objected to the Dalai Lama visiting Arunachal Pradesh, whereas India said that he's free to travel anywhere in this country. In 2019, when Prime Minister Modi visited the state, China opposed it, and the MEA said the state is an inalienable part of India. In that same year, China objected to Defense Minister Rajnath Singh visiting Arunachal Pradesh, saying that the Chinese government never acknowledged this northeastern state. In 2020, China cried foul over Home Minister Amit Shah's visit to Arunachal Pradesh, and they firmly opposed the visit of former Vice President Venkaiah Naidu there as well. All right, that's a wrap of this edition of Brass Tacks. Thanks very much for tuning in. I'll see you again on Day Night Same.